everyone, and welcome to yet another dynamic open source training session. We are so happy that you could be joining us. This is our fourth episode so far. And tonight we are exceptionally thrilled to have you join us either via Microsoft Teams in our webinar setting or via LinkedIn. You are really in for a doozy. So we're going to be kicking off with just giving you a bit of an idea about what the session is going to be about this evening. Our key speakers are going to be covering three topics, and this is such a big topic that we had to kind of hone it down to what we felt was most critical for organizations that's considering either insourcing or outsourcing their learning technology or some of the edtech tools. So tonight, our hope is to start off with creating a shared understanding about these two broad concepts, being cybersecurity and edtech. And then to really unpack this grappling million-dollar question everybody asks us all the time. Do we insource? Do we outsource? Do we build ourselves? Or do we go the partnership route? And there's sort of merit in either one of those strategies. But what we'd like to do tonight is identify for you and help identify for you some of the advantages, but also some of the potential risks and red flags that exist with deciding on which one of those strategies. And then we're going to just end off tonight with sharing a little bit about our journey. We've been working within the tech ecosystem for quite a while, and so have a couple of bumps and bruises. So we'd like to share with you some recommendations around how to mitigate risk, depending on which choice you'd like to make. And we're calling that our green flags. So hopefully you can learn from what we've deployed in the last 4.5 years. So joining us this evening, and I really don't want to take up too much time, but I think it's important to just identify for you, we've got two people in our own backyard joining the conversation tonight. Kamogelo Makumba, which is our learning experience design specialist, and David Londt, our head of information technology here at Omni. If the two of them can ready themselves and get on camera, we'd love to hear from the two of you. Welcome.
Thank you, Cass. Good to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Awesome. So before we actually get into it, I think just to put everyone's minds at ease joining us tonight, between these two gentlemen having the conversation, there's a wealth of experience between the two of them. So I'm going to try and do them some justice by reading a snippet out of their bios. So we're going to kick off with Kamo, looking after learning experience design. He's exceptionally passionate about delivering high quality and interactive learning experiences, and having worked within e-learning and digital technology, he's deployed some of those strategies within the US, UK, and South African markets. So it does give you a bit of a global feel in terms of how you will go about answering these questions tonight. And then David, we are privileged to have working with Omni, but prior to being with our organization, has more than 2 decades worth of sector experience working within the IT industry and for one of the leading IT organizations in South Africa. And working between corporates and government institutions, he's looked after client infrastructure, support, and pretty much everything else in between. So we are lucky to have had him join our organization. So David comes with the entire tech background that will allow us to understand tonight just what cybersecurity is. And that's where we kick it off this evening. David, if you can, and I really don't want to discount anyone joining us that has an understanding of it, but for purpose of our conversation, if you can just give our audience a very dumbed down, slimmed down version of what we mean when we talk about cybersecurity.
Thank you, Cassandra. Well, you can't give a shortened version of what cybersecurity is. It's quite a big thing. So I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. Just like a general overview of what cybersecurity is. So cybersecurity is the practice of defending, I use the word defending computers. It's all your tech gadgets, computers, servers, mobile devices, electronic systems, networks, and also the most important data from malicious attacks. It's also known as information technology security or electronic information security. The term applies in a variety of contexts, from business to mobile computing, and can be divided into a few common categories. I'll give you the most important categories. Okay, so it's network security, and that's where you are securing a computer network from intruders, whether targeted attackers or opportunistic malware. We all know what malware is. Then you get application security, which focuses on keeping software and devices free of threats. A compromised application could provide access to the data that it's actually designed to protect. And successful security, I believe, always begins in the design stage, whether it be software or a system or a network you're putting in place. Design stage is the most critical part before anything is deployed. Then you get information security, which that protects the integrity and privacy of data, both when it's stored, we call it when the data is at rest, and also in transit. Then you get operational security. This includes the processes and decisions for handling and protecting data assets. It's the permissions that various users have when accessing the network, and the procedures that determine how and where data may be stored or shared, all fall under this domain. Then you get important part is disaster recovery and business continuity when a cyber security incident occurs. So this defines how an organization responds to a cybersecurity incident or any other event that causes the loss of operations or data. So there's disaster recovery policies dictate how the organization restores its operations and information to return to the same operating capacity as before the event occurred. Then, this I find critical, and it's, cybersecurity education starts within your organization, and that's end user education. And so this addresses the most unpredictable cybersecurity factor, which is people. Anyone can accidentally click on an email, okay, with the link. And this introduces a virus into a secure system. And this happens by failing good security procedures. So by teaching users to delete suspicious email attachments, not plug in unidentified USB devices, and various other important lessons is vital for security of any organization. I told you this. I could sit you for hours talking about cybersecurity. So there's a few things I want to get in, So then you get the various types of cyber threats, okay? So there's cybercrime. This includes, so in the IT field, and when it comes to cyber security, we call these people actors, okay? So you get a single actor or groups that target systems for either financial gain or to cause disruption within a business. Then you get a cyber attack. This often involves politically motivated information gathering, okay? And then cyber terrorism, which is a big one, and that's intended to undermine electronic systems to cause panic and fear. There's been lots of cases of cyber terrorism against power plants, water infrastructure, things like that. So just quickly also to run down, so how, the thing is, how do malicious actors gain access to computer systems? So here's just a few methods that they use. So malware, we all know what malware is. It's one of the most common cyber threats. And then you get something called a SQL injection. So SQL stands for Structured Language Query. So that's databases. So a SQL injection is a type of cyber attack that's used to take control and steal data from a database, okay? So if you go onto a website and you fill a form, your name, surname, ID number, credit card details, things like that, it all gets stored in a database. Hackers would love to get their hands on databases, which has got all your vital information. Then the next one is, I like this one, is man-in-the-middle attack. Okay, so it's a type of cyber threat where a cyber criminal intercepts communication between two parties, okay, in order to steal data. So, for example, on an unsecured Wi-Fi network, and we find this mostly in your coffee shops, little restaurants and things like that, where an attacker could intercept data being passed from one person's device and the network. That's where interception comes. Then there's a DDoS attack, which is denial of service attack. Okay, yeah, that is where the cyber criminals prevent a computer system from fulfilling legitimate requests, and they do this by overwhelming the network and servers with traffic, dummy traffic. Okay, and then this renders the system unstable, and it prevents organization from carrying out vital functions, business functions. So to wrap it up now, as I said, I can carry forever. So the global cyber threat continues to evolve at a rapid pace, okay, with a rising number of data breaches each year. The most vulnerable people, not, I would say the most vulnerable, but the most targeted organizations are your medical services, retailers, and public entities. Okay, they experience the most breaches, with malicious criminals responsible for most incidents. Okay, some of these sectors are more appealing to cyber criminals because they collect financial and medical data. But all businesses that use networks can be targeted for customer data, corporate espionage, which is a big one as well, or customer attacks. So, you know, with the scale of the cyber threat set to continue to rise, you know, global spending on cybersecurity solutions is going to naturally increase. So the forecast for cybersecurity spend up until the end of this year, 2023, is going to reach $188.3 billion. Okay, and that's estimate that by 2026 it could reach $260 billion US. Okay, that's globally. That is corporations spending money to secure systems and prevent cyber attacks happening. That's it. I'll stop now, I promise.
Gosh, I somewhere read Forbes released an article indicating that about 74% of most cybersecurity attacks are linked to identity and identity theft. So I think just segueing into what we're talking about EdTech, obviously with regards to education, we are very much around what learning information we are gathering to get a learner started onto a learning journey, right? So Kamo, if I can just kick it over to you, and perhaps you could hone your answer to a much shorter one around just what EdTech is, or EduTech, which some people refers to it as. And is that different to e-learning, or is it the same thing?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Kaz. Look, I get that a lot, especially with client engagements, as well as internal stakeholders who really and easily throw these words around: EduTech, e-learning, EdTech. But there is a significant difference between EdTech and e-learning. And it's really important to understand the distinction between the two, right? So education technology, which is sometimes referred to as EduTech or EdTech, is the combined use of computer or software, as well as platforms and technologies to facilitate learning. And one might easily think that this is an adoption of a digital learning platform, but it's really more broader than that. It includes administrative systems, collaborative tools, and now we have virtual reality tools and applications that fit into that. So that's education technology. On the other hand, we have e-learning, and this specifically refers to the process of learning, which is conducted online. So we can say that e-learning is a subset of education technology, which would include platforms that we use for content delivery, assessments, as well as interactions, where you have interactive conversations with your learners. So think of it this way, in that education technology is what makes e-learning possible, because it provides the infrastructure, while e-learning is just a subset that operates within that infrastructure. And so through e-learning, you're able to deliver education to a global reach, different ages, different geographical locations, as well as different social and economic backgrounds. And I think that's why there is a push within the L&D spectrum for e-learning, I think particularly because of this reach that it enforces. So in a nutshell, I won't be as long as David, but in a nutshell, there is the difference between education technology and e-learning being that subset within that entire infrastructure.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kamo. And I think this is a perfect opportunity now that we've created the foundation between these two concepts to actually have a look at why we are here tonight. And that's this million-dollar question all the time, that organizations are looking to upskill, reskill, retrain their staff at a much cheaper rate, in a more rapid, agile, easily accessible manner. And so here comes the question around digital transformation, and whether or not we build our own edtech environment within our company, even if our core business might be retail, or do we outsource? And I really would like our audience online to just hone in on some of the burning questions you might have around this. But what we'd like to start off with is, Kamo and David, please just feel free to jump in. But we're all familiar with open source platform tools. So things like lynda.com, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Khan Academy, those are all open source platforms, right? And so organizations could outsource utilizing platforms that are readily available. And if we just look at outsourcing in the open source space, my question would be is, sitting with a learning hat on, what will be the advantages for organizations to go that route? And then David, if you can just maybe look at, and it's not shutting it down, but is what could be some of the red flags that organizations should consider if they were outsourcing utilizing open source platforms? So Kamo, if we can start off with you to just give us some advantages that comes to mind.
Yeah, so there are many advantages that organizations could benefit from when it comes to outsourcing digital learning solutions and solutions that are particularly for the L&D initiatives, right? But obviously with any model and with any strategy that is implemented, there are advantages and disadvantages that we could look at, whether you're building in-house or whether you're outsourcing. But to your question, outsourcing allows you to, first of all, get the content readily available. So you're tapping into the expertise of specialized edtech providers who are well-versed in creating effective learning content. So the content is there already, it's created. When you look at costs, it can be also cost-effective, depending on the business need and the overall strategy that is being implemented. It can be cost-effective than developing in-house solutions. So there's the opportunity to save costs on either hiring experts, training and upskilling a dedicated in-house team responsible for the research and development of learning solutions and online learning interventions. You spend less on software and the infrastructure setup to actually create that platform that you want to create. And there's also the scalability element, whereby outsourcing can enable an organization to scale the learning initiatives more easily and efficiently. So whether you're trying to reach a small group, or as I mentioned, with the reach that online learning has, or whether you have a national footprint or a global footprint, External providers who have their content readily available can adjust resources accordingly, right? And then obviously you're able to filter content according to your specific demands, as well as your specific L&D initiatives. But it's not all roses, I can say that, Cass, in that you have this infrastructure already set up for you. And then obviously just tapping into there and disseminating it right to your employees. There are also some things that you still have to look at, one of them being the cybersecurity element, being that you are exposing your internal operations and your internal systems to other third-party organizations. And it's important then in this case to research different elements, such as how compliant are they when it comes to cybersecurity and their protocols that they have in place, right? So you have not so much control over the developmental process, the quality reviews and the updates. So you're more likely to rely on the providers' timeline, their decisions, and obviously, we're dealing with EdTech, as I mentioned, so there's data privacy that comes into play. And that's where obviously cybersecurity is paramount. So outsourcing, great, but it could also potentially expose your sensitive learn information to third-party risks, if not handled, obviously, with proper protocols. And obviously, there's the customization element, which is, I think, one of the most important element when you are rolling out learning and development initiatives. You want to create content that is customized and personalized to your participants. And whether the overall strategic intent is to push performance or to create a different learning culture, or to drive results within any spectrum of the company, you have limited customization rights when it comes to outsourcing. You're finding content that is already there, and sometimes it may just not be linked particularly to your results. So very important that you disseminate and you really research solutions that align perfectly with the organization's needs or the strategic objectives for these learning initiatives.
Got you. Awesome. James, on the outsource model, thoughts around, and I think Kamo sort of touched on it around sort of the data potential breaches. What would be some of the red flags, or just maybe your advice to some of the IT tech managers within organizations when L&D comes to them with, right, this is what we'd like to do? What would be the key considerations there?
Well, these days, even outsourced, having in-house servers to house a system like that, it's costly. It costs a lot of money. So a lot of providers like that go the cloud route. Now, everyone thinks that they have this idea that I'm going to put my stuff in the cloud and it's going to be completely safe. I don't need to do anything. But that's actually incorrect. There are steps that as a business we have to take to ensure that what we are putting in someone else's cloud platform is secure. And some of the red flags there is, one of them is the lack of visibility in what data is within these cloud applications. Okay. Then also theft of data from a cloud application by a malicious actor. Okay. Hackers can hack into a cloud service. Okay. They don't only hack into on-premises service. Okay. Then there's also the incomplete control over who can access sensitive data within that organization. Okay. We don't know who has what certain level of data access to a customer's data. Okay. Then there's also, I've experienced with certain cloud providers that there's a lack of staff within that business with the skills to manage security for the cloud application. Okay. And then there's also important one, insider threats. Okay. So that's an ability to prevent malicious insider theft or misuse of our data, your data, company's data itself. Yeah, I could carry on with the list, but there are red flags that come up. But you would think that when you're signing up for a service like that, that a business like that would conform to all security standards and have everything in place to provide a good, resilient service.
I want to just move on to still sticking with the outsource concept, but with organizations that primarily specialize in e-learning, e-learning libraries, having content readily available. So the first ones we touched on was sort of the open source ones, which anybody can access, not at a paid for medium necessarily. It's open. That's exactly what it is, populated by people across the world. But then you get those that have subscription models. So the likes of Go One, we all know who they are. Open Sesame, Omni has its own e-learning platform, which also could follow a subscription model. So when there's a paid for service and an organization's looking to outsource, I suppose the question for me would be does the owners primarily rely on the outsource partner, in this case, Omni, Go One, Open Sesame, to ensure that organizations are not compromised? So how is that different to utilizing open source platforms? David, I think just to touch on where you've just left off, how is it different when we are partnering with organizations that say, hey, we've got, and I've got a banner here, more than 200 providers on our platform. You can utilize them at X, dollars a month, and we're putting it out there and people are paying for it. So how's that different? And where does this sort of the risk lie if organizations are going with these big brand names? Surely there's still potentially a possibility of compromisation.
Look, it is. Any system is open to being compromised. Okay, you can have the best security measures in place, but what it comes down to is having the staff and the information security team to detect the threat and then immediately stop it. There's been lots of instances where there's been cyber attacks, and these threat actors have actually embedded software within a system, and it lies dormant for months. Or there's actually hackers that's inside a system that's been there for months. I think it was, I couldn't remember the company's name now, but there was a hacker that was inside the system for over a year, looking at how the system works. Okay, and then only after that year, you actually launched the cyber attack. So, it's a difficult thing that, once again, I'll say, when you're signing up for something like that, you would expect that they have the proper things in place. And this is where the ISO IEC 27001 comes into effect. Okay, so that is it's a standard that's it's a tool for risk management, cyber resilience, and then operational success. Okay, if you have that stamp of approval, it means you are conforming to every single standard, okay, that's within that ISO. So
Gotcha.
It's difficult. It's a difficult thing to answer.
I think the scary part is we obviously don't want to scare people away from not doing it, but one cannot, as an organization, abdicate the fact that, oh, I've partnered with an ISO organization, so we don't have to do anything. I think perhaps what we're trying to illustrate here is there's an onus on the provider, which is providing the solution, the subscription, the service, to ensure that they've got all the mechanisms in place to ensure data is protected, encrypted, and not compromised. And then there will always still be the organization that needs to ensure that whatever data is passing through back and forth, that they've got security measures in place. So there's no one entity in this equation that is totally abdicated from ensuring safety, which I suppose leads us to the answer that partnerships then, in the case, would be potential solution. So in other words, are we then saying, guys, that stick to what you do as a business, company X, however, you leverage your IT department to ensure that they have checks and balances in place with whoever you are partnering with, and ensuring your partner has the necessary protocols in place. Is that the argument we are making here tonight?
So for example, we do business with a certain company. Before they even would do anything with us on an e-learning platform, okay, I had to fill out documents, okay, that said our systems are secure, that we have done pen testing, you know, what standard of firewall do you have, what security protocols do you have in place, you know, the list goes on. So yes, companies, you know, if you're going to sign up with a provider, okay, make sure you do your research first and have a not a questionnaire, but a don't know what you want to call it.
Governance checklist.
There we go. Exactly, that's it. And that and most importantly, that you conform to GDPR and POPI Acts, okay, which is really important as well. So yeah.
Come on, your thoughts?
No, absolutely. I believe that with any partnership, and I think even if you have an in-house system that you are deploying for your learning interventions, and you need to integrate some third-party tools, for example, on a learning management system where you need extra plugins to facilitate your learning, it's very important to really question their compliance level. As to how compliant are they with their protocols? Do they have authentication methods that are in place, right? Because once that system or that piece of software is in your learner management system, they basically have access to all of your learner data, their identification documents, and all of that data that you would have curated to facilitate that learning. And especially from an L&D's perspective, you need various documentation and details to remain compliant. So very crucial to maybe even partner up with a cybersecurity expert to do that checking for you, so that you are always safe, really. So I think it's very important, especially with outsourcing, because you don't know how they set up their compliance documents and their compliant methods and their cybersecurity methods, and how compatible are they with your systems as well. So I think as with my team, especially with as part of our research and development, we really try gauge the history, for example, of that software. How long has it been there? What have they done? Have there been any data risks and data breaches and unauthorized access that has been happening in their spectrum and in their space? And how did they mitigate it, right? So I think it's a very crucial component to consider, whether you're insourcing or outsourcing.
Fabulous. I think we've kind of given our audience an overview of sort of outsource, insource, that led us to perhaps maybe identify partnerships being a really good way to build a partner into your ecosystem. But I want to just take a step back from the strategy itself. So if an organization's strategy is to digitally transform their learning, or just to actually just digitize certain things, that's one component. But I really want to just quickly talk about the actual end user, and David originally spoke about it around the individual sometimes opens up an organization to risk, right? How important is the end user and their experience and the accessibility to learning. I want to do it on my device, in the taxi, in the bus, on my way home. How important is the end user in the consideration for organizations as to whether or not to insource or outsource? And come on, I want to ask you that from a learner experience perspective, because I think often as L&D professionals, we want to make learning as accessible as possible. The learning to find the learner where they are. I can do it on multiple devices, and that's fantastic. But there could be potential other challenges. So my question to you is how crucial and how big of a component should the end user experience be in an organization's strategy decision?
So the learner is key. So my position is a learner experience design, and my key focus is really making sure that the learner experience is enhanced through the use of technology, through the use of educational theories, updated software, a proficient learning management system, just to create an overall wonderful and creative and engaging, interactive, effective learning experience. So learner is key. And when we're formulating an L&D strategy, particularly for EdTech, it's important to identify key technologies within EdTech that you could deploy based on your learner skill set, geographical location, and now with the access to more interactive and more updated learning tools, we are now able to create personalized learner experiences and learner pathways, right? And this hinges on adaptability and alignment to what exactly is the skill that you're trying to teach. So you could deploy a learning management system, a virtual classroom, secure assessments, but then depending on what you are teaching, in this case, you probably even need more hands-on training. And the strategy can be tailored to address those specific skill sets needed. For example, as I mentioned, we have virtual reality and augmented reality now for more hands-on practical learning experiences. So that we can actually engage with learners on that level. So it's crucial to ensure that also these participants or learners or employees, whatever the case may be, are comfortable using the tools themselves, so they understand them. For an example, on our learning management system in-house within Omni, we've created an interactive chatbot powered by AI tools to create that learning experience where learners can actually familiarize themselves with the learning management systems and the tools that we've deployed. So this means navigating through the system, understanding what you need to do in order to remain competent and complete your activities. So incorporating those training and navigation tools on how to effectively navigate and utilize these tools is critical to enhancing the learner experience, just so that even when you do deploy cybersecurity elements onto the platform, they're received, first of all, so learners are able to create those two-factor authentication methods and all of those systems that we would have created. So I believe that the success for any learning strategy, as I mentioned, it hinges on its adaptability and alignment, obviously to industry trends. However, the active involvement of these participants is also very crucial. And you want learners who are engaged and are interactive within your learning solutions. And as I mentioned, there's a huge demand for personalized learning experiences that are tailored for each person's skill level, their background, their goals. And now we're using assessments and pre-assessments to determine their knowledge. And then we're able to offer customized pathways. And now within our industry, we have obviously a mix of videos, interactive quizzes, simulations, to keep people engaged. So learner is key, definitely. In fact, they are the middle center of whatever interventions that we try to create around learning experiences.
Fab. I think just in our own journey, if I reflect on engaging with clients, sometimes there's an imbalance in organizations looking at the strategic intent. Sometimes the tech teams are considered, sometimes they only get advised afterwards, this is the tool we think we want to deploy. And the learner sometimes gets lost, the end user gets lost in that equation, because we do have a strategic objective to do more with less. And I think that's why many people went the online route. But I want to touch on one other stakeholder, and perhaps there's maybe a few other stakeholders actually in the equation, and to just bring this conversation back to David, which is around the access to data. So I typically think of the likes of your EE representative in an organization, or an HR professional, or even just department heads. They might want to have readily available data extracts in a certain way for their decision making and for what they need to use it. And often that's not always possible. So data sits in multiple different places, and people feel frustrated that, oh, well, this is not working because I can't get what I want. I just want to maybe, if you can, David, just talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on data integration, so pulling data from multiple sources into one single home, versus data segregation. So in other words, different stakeholders can tap into this data hub and get that which they need to get, without having to call IT each time or feel like they weren't considered in the strategy conversation. What is your thoughts on what organizations should consider? So doing many APIs with data from everywhere, or actually just looking at the segregation of information in one single place?
Yeah, when it comes to data, it's vital that not everyone has access to that bulk of data. Okay, so this is where you look at having data silos. Okay, and with that, you're giving certain people a certain level of access to data that they only require. Okay, and that comes with I do it with Microsoft. Okay, I create a tag, I create tags and policies. Okay, saying that this classification of data is only accessible to these users. Okay, and then also, the next one is only accessible to this user, and so forth and so forth. But I think, the most important part is that you are going to have, in bigger companies, you have data governance, okay, where you have a committee of data people, okay, sitting, okay, and they're sifting and sorting through data and classifying them and saying, these people can have access to that data and so forth. But in smaller organizations, you don't have that. You might only have one person that controls all the data, okay? And then let's take Zoho, for example, that we use. We have one person that's responsible for all that data, okay? We've been playing around with integration between our e-learning platform and Zoho, where someone is input with all the information into Zoho, and we're looking at automatically creating an account for them in Moodle. But we don't need all that data that they've put in Zoho. We only need certain data. So that's where you create a I call it a what can we call it? Let's call it an API. Okay. That only has certain data tables in it: first name, surname, and email address. That's all we need to create an account in our e-learning platform. We don't need ID numbers, cell phone numbers, things like that. So yeah, I
maybe
always think
just to quickly clarify what you just mentioned now, the two platforms that you were referencing, Zoho is typically a CRM system, and Moodle, which David referenced, is a learner management system. Yeah. So, David, if I can just quickly summarize what you were saying there is organizations can have multiple different platforms for collecting different pieces of data. And that could all be integrated into one place where you have either data scientists or specialists looking at how do I provide the necessary access based on permission levels, security levels, or authentication. And of course, we naturally want to make it as easy as possible for people to get that which they need in order to do their jobs. But the thought of data sitting across multiple places, is there a way in which organization can instead, and I don't know if this pushes it out onto the end user, but collecting data once off that is fit for purpose and ensuring that that gets stored and then it gets segregated in different ways? I suppose that's probably more in your larger entities that have enterprise systems.
Yeah, quite right. And that data segregation can be done. Okay, you have systems, you can have systems that do it. It's as I said, Zoho, Moodle, we only need three pieces of data that needs to go through. Okay, the rest we'll pull it from that whole data set. Okay, and only use what's needed in Moodle itself. So yeah, it's
true. I suppose it's also, again, speaking to the compliance element of POPI, I'm not asking you for information that is not required at a specific step in the journey.
Yeah.
And we've seen sometimes organizations ask so much of information on enrollment. You sometimes feel, why do you need all of this right now if I'm potentially just about to inquire about a program, right? And I think that's also critical when organizations are looking at sort of partnerships. Why is an organization asking for ID number, race, gender, all of those when someone's just signing up? So I think it is about being critical about what data you get to leave that leaves your organization versus asking for purpose of, okay, well, I've collected it, so in case HR comes to me, we have it. So I think it is quite important, the strategy component. So thanks for that. We are at about 10 minutes before we need to wrap. And I think it might be an ideal time now to possibly just share some of our green flags. I think there might have been elements that you guys have dropped throughout your conversation this evening. So I'm maybe going to just ask us to just summarize, and Kamo, I'll start with you. And really, yeah, I want you to be quite independent from what Omni has done, but also potentially just leverage, what do we want to give advice to organizations looking, whichever route they want to go, in-source, outsource, but what is just some of the risk mitigation and some of the wins we've experienced operating in the EdTech ecosystem space?
Yeah, so look, research is paramount, especially when you are formulating or you're crafting your overall L&D strategy, which obviously boils down to your educational technology and the deployment of e-learning. It's very important to connect and network with people and experts around that area, right? So when you look at outsourcing, and obviously because there is a significant demand that comes with this option, you look at the resources and the dedicated staff and the technical infrastructure and the ongoing maintenance as well that you would be, for example, have to look after, and how that has an impact on your internal departments, and if they do have the necessary expertise. For example, if you're doing in-house, and obviously technological limitations. What technological infrastructure do you have existing in your company versus an EdTech provider? And if your strategy is to maintain cutting-edge solutions, do you have that in-house, or do you have someone that can do that for you? Because if you do have it in-house, you are continuously required to invest in technology, because we always have updates, we always have new learning experience platforms that you might need to also look into and integrate. And I do find that sometimes organizations might struggle to keep up with these latest tools and platforms. And obviously this has an impact on the learning solutions that they would have drafted from the beginning as part of their learning strategy. So for example, if you're partnering with Omni, which we have a library of courses available, it's always important as well to ask those questions as well, and the reporting and the integrity of data. Both insourcing, outsourcing have their own advantages as well as disadvantages. But it's always good to go back to the drawing board and determine if the deployment really does feed into the overall strategy. Does it have the impact on the main objective, but most primarily the learner, who will be obviously at the end of this initiative. So yeah, that will be me for my side.
Gotcha. Fab, thanks. David, any green flags, pearls of wisdom you'd like to share?
Well, I'm going to look at our e-learning system. We started off with a server, on-premises server, and it grew. Our e-learning platform grew so big that we had to make a decision. Are we going to spin up new servers on premises, or are we going to have a look at cloud servers? And we did a lot of research into various cloud providers. Various things we looked at, firewalls, login security, where it comes to, okay, so let's go, well, I'm going to start on the back end, on the server side, okay, where everything's hosted on. So it's firewalls that the cloud provider serves and has. Then there's login security into that cloud service, okay. Then also bot protection, okay. Do they have anything, like bots that security that prevents brute force attacks, okay, denial of service attacks, things like that. Most important was database security, okay. So our current cloud provider, you cannot access our database, okay, at all from outside a computer, from an outside computer. You have to be logged into the app to access the database. But then you still can't do that, which we have to whitelist an IP address. Okay, if your IP address is white, you don't have access to the database at all. Then application isolation. So if I've got more than one application running on one server, if something happens to one application, we know that it's not going to affect the other application that's running on there. Then obviously SSL, most important, SSL certificates, ensuring that your application's data that's in transit is encrypted. And then various other things like user role management, who has what levels of administrative access to the servers, operation security, system security. Vital is GDPR, because we do a lot of business for, companies that are overseas. That's a vital part. So do we conform to GDPR compliance with that? Also within the cloud platform, two-factor authentication, end-to-end encryption as well, and then also suspicious device logging. Now that's only on a server level. What we're doing in the front end is, it's your basic username and password, but we are going to be rolling out multi-factor authentication within the next 2 weeks. We also going to be starting research on not only having one instance of OmniStack or our Moodle application, but having individual instances of that application for different, if we have 6 different companies doing it, they're logging into one platform. We're looking at segregating those, okay, and having various different applications. to prevent if we have a problem on our platform and we have to do a restore. Everyone that's in that
application would be affected.
Is affected. Yeah. So that's the positives about it. Looking at that. Also, if you're having in-house, you've got to have the expertise. You've got to have the technical team that's going to be able to. You have to have, your LAN administrators. You have to have people that know how to work with the operating system, which is not a basic Windows operating system. It's Linux that runs in there. You need a Moodle expert that knows the administration side of it. The list goes on.
I think we want to leave our audience with the assurance that partnerships and building collaborative partnerships with providers out there that really is passionate. I think if you didn't get the passion and the depth of skill from these two gents this evening, not sure what you heard, but it is really important to rather really look at what your core business is. And we partner with organizations that their core business is exactly that. Edtech tools, ecosystems, and having the security measures in place to ensure your organization and learners that are going through learning journeys are protected. I don't think there's not merit in considering insourcing, but to just go back to Kamo's point around the cost, around ensuring continuous upgrades. And again, if it's not your core business, it might not be top of mind for you, or you might not have the requisite skills around you to advise or support in how to protect yourself. So I think we've laid out all the options this evening. But for me, if I summarize what goes back from what the guys or the gentlemen have said tonight is, it's really what is the strategy? And within what that strategy is are we considering the relevant stakeholders that influence that potential strategy? And probably $1 million question is, are you looking to scale? Are you looking for on-demand, just in time and happy with curated content from partners? Then those are some of the opportunities that does exist out in the market. So gents, that gives us a wrap in terms of what we wanted to cover this evening, is just to really leave our community with an understanding of these two core concepts that literally is affecting every single business. I don't think there's a single business out there that doesn't need to protect themselves, but also is looking at continuously upskilling their staff in some shape or form that doesn't always have the time or capability to send them into classrooms. So I think that is what we want to leave our audience with tonight, is hopefully you've gotten some golden nuggets out of what both Kamo and David have shared. And if there is any potential questions, really to look at what your organization might need, we are very happy to arrange a consultation and just to talk about it, or to do referrals to some of our partners. Omni is a content partner to Go1, and so that's why I very easily referenced that earlier. But we also have our own. So literally our team is readily available to support you. So if there is any questions, which I have kept my eye on, nothing's come through at all on both platforms, other than commentary, and really people are fans of collaboration. So in other words, stick to that which you know, and partner with the experts that know what they know. That wraps up our session for this evening. Just to remind everybody, if you are joining us for the first time, you are more than welcome to make your way to our website or our YouTube channel to catch up on previous sessions. But we are back here at the end of September, just to get my dates right, it's the 27th of September at 6 p.m. South African Central Time. And we are going to be talking about leadership and managing change in a post-pandemic world. And we really want to be positive around this. We're post-pandemic. So really what onus is on leaders to look at how to manage differently. And that is the back of this tech talk. Tech being a huge component of how leaders need to manage their teams digitally or in a hybrid fashion. So that is us, over and out from Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll be online for the next 2 to 3 minutes before we wrap it up. But if there is any last minute questions, you can pop that through. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you online on the 27th of September. Cheers, everyone. Thanks, David and Kamo.
Thank you, Cass.
Thank you.